It is the 12th of February, 2016, and this is episode 43 of the Unseen Podcast. The Unseen Podcast is the unscripted, unedited, open participation spin-off of the Wow Signal. To learn more about the Wow Signal, go to wowsignalpodcast.com. To learn more about this podcast, go to unseenpodcast.com. Now, as you know, every few weeks we have a special guest on the show. Not every time, but every month or 2 months. And tonight we have our special guest, Bob Novella from the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. And Bob, say hello.
Hey, everybody. Like you said, I'm a co-host of the Skeptics Guide to the Universe podcast. I love talking about science, especially physics and astronomy on the show. And we've been doing it for 10 years now, and it's going very well. So it's great to be here, guys. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And, oh gosh, we have a lot of guys in the hangout tonight. No ladies, unfortunately. We need to remedy that, but we will at some point. We have, though, Adam Synergy Smith.
Hi. Hello from England.
Hello, Adam. And from Poland, we have Mateusz Macias.
Hello, guys. Hello from Poland.
Now, Mateusz was instrumental in getting Bob on the show, so thank you, Mateusz. We have Mike Bowler.
Hello, welcome from Chicago, Illinois, U.S.
And Nick Nielsen has joined us.
Hello from Portland, Oregon.
And Patrick Festa.
Hello from New Jersey, and it's a pleasure to meet somebody from the Skeptics Guide.
Now, all these folks have been on before except for Bob. So if you want to know about the bios or the adorable faces of these folks, go to our panelist page on unseenpodcast.com. Okay. Before we start, gentlemen, a toast to the detection of gravity waves.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
To gravity waves.
To gravity waves.
Cheers.
I remember
To LIGO.
as a teenager reading in Science News about how Joseph Weber was trying to find gravity waves with a huge chunk of aluminum in his lab. And, of course, he failed to do that. But it took 40 years to figure it out.
He kind of, my take was that he kind of gave gravity wave research a little bit of a bad name because he apparently found gravity waves every day. He was saying, look, I found more gravity waves. And of course, the technology wasn't even near to what it needed to be for that to happen. So I recently wrote a post on this, and I was saying how, one of the reasons why the research team had to, really make sure they nailed this was because, scientists are a little bit skeptical hearing about, gravity waves. I mean, not so much the past couple of years because the LIGO research has been accelerating so much, but it was a little bit something to overcome. Plus, you had the Bicep 2 fiasco last year where they said they found primordial gravitational waves, and that was bad too. So I was glad that this looks pretty damn solid.
Yeah, and with each of those mistakes, there's a lesson learned, and we move on. I think what Joe Weber was trying to do was very brave and probably impossible. But
absolutely, and I think he made some critical advances in the field as well. So he definitely contributed to the field, I think.
Yeah, it was. I almost became his graduate student, actually.
Oh wow!
But that was a long time ago. I don't remember all the details.
What technique was he using back then?
He was putting piezoelectric sensors on a big chunk of aluminum and hoping that he could detect the strain in the aluminum.
Okay.
But he was off by orders of magnitude in the size of the effect. So.
Oh yeah.
So he there's really little hope, but I think that's what you have to do. You have to do things that are wrong and mistaken, and then you find out, oh, okay, we don't understand this very well yet. Let's work through it.
I wish he could have seen this day. I mean, he'd be as excited as anybody, I'd say.
Oh yeah. And but this was something that was predicted over 100 years ago.
Exactly, I think 100.
Well, just about 100 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, right, 1916.
So, just and what was a very dark period in history.
Oh yeah.
And now we have, I think it's going to be very exciting. What LIGO is just the baby step. There's going to be a lot more in the future.
Oh sure, and it really, it's only accurate within. It can only detect a certain ranges of frequencies, I believe. So
yeah.
We would need, say, if you wanted to detect primordial gravitational waves, LIGO wouldn't be able to do something like that. But that's one of the things actually that I'm most excited about, because if we could ever really detect gravitational primordial waves, we could learn about the Big Bang, because we can't get past the cosmic microwave background radiation. I mean, that was 400,000 years after the Big Bang, and then after that you can't get any deeper in time because the light, there was no light earlier in the universe. But gravity waves, they don't care. They will just go through anything. So we could get to fractions of a second, the tiniest fractions, right after the Big Bang, and really, who knows what we'll learn. That is going to be amazing.
Yeah,
that's a Nobel Prize.
The Europeans are working on a longer wavelength satellite system that will.
Right. Yep.
Which we bailed out of a few years ago to pay for the James Webb Space.
How would they do that? I mean, the sensitivity of LIGO is so insane. All the things that they have in place to isolate just that gravitational wave. I mean, how would you have that much control over satellites? That, to me, that would. Sure, you're in space.
Yeah, they're a much quieter environment.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I mean, that's a good point. But still,
they just launched the LISA technology demonstrator, which they're using to kind of work those problems out.
Right.
And it will be years before they're ready to.
Sure. But it's what's bad. You have a problem. It's like, oh, we got to go into space and fix the problems. You better make sure you got it right the first time, right?
Yeah. It is. It's harder.
If I may, I just finished watching the weekly space hangout where Morgan Reinberg explained very well about the first detection and how they managed it, and without actually explaining it for him, I'm not going to go into that. But I would recommend watching that episode that was just posted.
Okay.
And Ben Tippett had a very kind of sentimental but very insightful. Just right after it was announced, he recorded a podcast that came out last night on titanium physicist. He didn't do his usual episode. It was just him. But Ben is a general relativist, so you might want to check that one out too. It's pretty short, about half an hour. So anyway, let's move on from there. We will get somebody like Brian Cumberline on the show at some point to really give us the lowdown on that at some, soon. But for right now, we have Bob, and I know a lot of you guys want to have questions for Bob, so let's just kick it off. Who wants to go first?
Let's start at the beginning then, shall we?
Sure.
I'd like to ask Bob why he started his podcast.
Well, it all started in 1996. Actually, we had found Skeptical Inquirer a few years before that, and we just totally ate it up. We just loved it. And we were flipping through the magazine, and at the very end, it showed you the states in the United States that have local chapters, and there was nothing for Connecticut. And Perry said, "Hey, there's nothing in Connecticut. Let's start a local chapter." So we started it. We had meetings. We had newsletter. And of course, this was the World Wide Web, which was in its infancy at that point. So we did that. We would have quarterly meetings and write articles and stuff. But when in 2005, we were looking for something else to do, and somebody suggested a podcast. They actually wanted a political podcast, and Steve said, "No, we're gonna do a skeptical podcast," and that's what started. And we pretty much caught very early in the history of podcasting.
Yeah, before that, you guys did some ghost investigations at some point, did you?
Yeah, we worked one night with a local radio station, and we went to a house and we did an overnight ghost investigation. And so we had the skeptics and we had the true believers, and we stayed there all night. And of course, I mean, nothing happened, but it was fun.
You wear
it was
an outfit?
No,
Did you
we didn't have our proton accelerators. They were in the shop. But it was a fun experience. And man, that was so long ago. I can't believe it. But yeah, that was good. That was fun. We haven't done enough of those.
Did you ever say, "What was that sound"?
Yes, we heard that very often that night. What was that? Did you hear that? No, I didn't hear anything. Or that was just a pipe. Come on.
So when you started this podcast, what were your expectations?
We would be happy if we got a little bit of a bigger audience than we had for our New England Skeptical Society. We had a newsletter. We figured maybe 500 people would see it. You know, we had 300 or 400 members. So we were very happy to try to exceed that number. So when we hit like 1,000 listeners or 2,000 or 3,000, we were like, wow, can you imagine 3,000 listeners every week? That just blew our mind. So we just did not expect it to ramp up that fast. We were kind of riding the wave of the increase in interest in podcasting, and now we're doing something like 160,000 downloads a week for the new show. That doesn't even include the archives. So yeah, so it just exploded, and we never would have imagined we'd be seeing those numbers and the interest, and it's just ballooned. I mean, going to the conferences and speaking is amazing, and meeting everybody. It really just opened the world of skepticism to us far beyond what we anticipated.
Go ahead, Mateusz. You want to say something?
Bob, when you guys started, did you anticipate that science and fiction is going to be so popular?
No, we actually we looked at a few emails from 10 years ago, and Steve had suggested that we would do the news items, that we would do science or fiction, and that we would do what was the other one? I think those were the two big ones, and we didn't think that would be the number one. Everyone loves science or fiction, and Steve kind of lifted it from it was a very popular segment, something very similar in oh God, what was the name of that radio show? I forget, but it was something that lots of people have done similar ideas, but I never would have thought that it would. People just are crazy about it, and that's one segment that will never ever go away. It's just too much fun and too popular.
Yeah, it is kind of fun.
And frustrating.
Yeah, and very competitive.
Yes. I'm going to kick their butts this year.
So who's on top now? Who's the best?
Well, this year is still kind of early. I think it's between me. I think Kara and I are on top right now. But at this point in the year, it's meaningless. I remember one year I had 9 correct wins 9 weeks in a row, which or maybe even 10 or 12, and then I just kind of crapped out and the rest of the year. So it's hard to predict. But I'm very motivated this year. There's no way I'm gonna lose to those guys. Rebecca was tough. She beat me quite often, but I was always right on her heels. But Jay and Evan were always kind of far away, so I'm not gonna allow them to best me this year.
Right.
See how it goes. So
was it hard to do the podcast without Rebecca?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was tough. It was very unusual. The first bunch of shows, we all missed her. She really added something special to the show. She was just so much fun. So yeah, it was tough. It was tough, but we're very and we were sad to see her go, but we're very happy. Cara Santa Maria is fantastic. We meshed with her so long, like we've been friends for a decade. So we're very happy that she's on the show.
Yeah, and I know, of course, very early on. Well, not so that early, but Perry DeAngelis, who is now no longer with us, was quite a personality.
He he was larger than life. I mean, there's not many people that you could really and truly say that statement about, but he was incredibly larger than life in all ways. But yeah, that was incredibly sad and frustrating to see his decline there. And then when he died, it was horrible, of course. But what's incredible is that to this day, we get emails from people that have just gone through the podcast and they just experienced Perry's death, 10, 15 years later, and they're like crying and upset, and they really impacted him. So it's really rewarding to know that Perry will be on the internet forever and affecting people decades to come. Maybe maybe aliens will be listening to him in 200 years. Who knows?
Oh, there already are.
I gotta say,
they woke me up last night to tell me that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've listened to the first 160 episodes, and I get to know Perry, and I really got fond of him, and he's so funny. He was just sometimes in science and fiction, he just didn't care. He just like, I don't care. I think it's DB. I don't know. I don't care. It's so funny. And all the monkey versus bird.
Yes, the monkey bird.
Oh, I got to tell you guys, a bird can whoop a monkey's ass anytime.
We didn't even try. You can't replace Perry. The show took a big hit when we lost him, and just do the best you can.
Do you guys still organize some memorial every year?
Well, we started the Perry DeAngelis Memorial Show. We did a few in New York, and then that kind of morphed into Nexus that we do every spring. So that's still kind of a memorial to him, and we mention him every year when we do the show in Manhattan. So so that's kind of like his memorial as well.
Okay. So Bob, let's fast forward a bit to the present. I mean, you guys are kind of a legendary podcasters. You were around near the beginning, and you have a big audience now. But you've seen the skeptical movement go from zero to what it is now, with a lot of turmoil, I have to say, in recent years. Where do you think, I have many questions about this, but let's start with one. Do we need a skeptics movement, or is it just science, or is it just science literacy? Is there is there really a skeptical movement that makes sense to have?
Sure. I mean, I absolutely think we need one that makes sense. Not just science literacy is fantastic, and I'm all for it, of course. But by focusing on science literacy, you're not necessarily focusing on critical thinking and the important ways to evaluate evidence, things that are just sorely lacking throughout the world today. So we definitely need a movement that addresses that specific thing. But the thing is, I mean. Skepticism is different things to different people. You find it has so many components to it. You just find your niche that you like, and that's what you do. It doesn't have to be a specific A, B, and C. This is what it's about, and this is what you have to do. So find your focus and just run with that. It's great that so many people have different areas that they want to focus on. You don't have to be all things to everybody.
Right.
So I think it's important.
I was around in the early days, although I wasn't very involved, but there was a lot of, ghosts and psychics and that sort of thing. Do you think that, what are the key issues for skepticism to address now?
Some of the important things like horoscopes and Bigfoot. I mean, and psi, those things were, they were a lot bigger years ago, and they seem kind of silly now. But I mean, the important things now are, I think, the things that that really hurt people. I mean, horoscopes really don't hurt a lot of people, but alternative medicine really does hurt a lot of people. Anti-vaxxers really hurts a lot of people. Even anti-GMO activists are affecting potentially millions of people. I mean, those are things that are really important, and things that people really need to wrap their heads around and wade through all the misinformation and misdirections that are being thrown out there, and just look at the science. What is the science saying? So those things, I think, are key. And it's ironic that I don't really even focus on those things, because that's not my wheelhouse. I leave that in Steve's capable hands. I love handling, the science aspect, physics, astronomy, all that, but those in terms of importance in skepticism, those things I think are up there, certainly.
Right. Okay.
Can you attribute some of that your success to your individual? I mean, your interest in the astronomy, physics, Steve, and the medicine, and each one is that almost like a success, part of your success, that you got individuals that are passionate about those topics?
Partly, I think so, for sure. But I think the most important thing, I think, in terms of popularity, the way I see it, is that when most of us grew up together, so we interact in an entertaining way, I suppose. Often we know what the other person is going to say. So I think the chemistry that we just naturally share, I think, is one of the key reasons why we've attained the popularity that we have. And that's something that you can't really force. It's something that's hard to develop. We just kind of, have it because three of us are brothers, and Evan we've known for many, many years. So I think that chemistry that we share, I think that's critical, absolutely critical.
Yeah. But I do notice there's each individual has your
Right.
individual passions of what you're interested in, which I think brings probably enhances your basic your base.
Absolutely, yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. I mean, I love what I love. Steve, of course, is just amazing, brilliant. He's the anchor, the foundation of the entire show. We'd really be nowhere without him. And Jay, Jay and Evan and Kara and the rest, they add something that you can't. I would not want to have to do without. It is I think a diverse and ensemble that we all contribute what we do. It's great.
Where do you see the future of? Okay, let's start with the future of Skeptics' Guide to the Universe. How do you see that going?
We are going to continue doing the show that we've been doing for 10 years. We haven't missed a show literally in 10 years every week. I think that's a badge that we wear, because not many podcasts are out there that can say that. So we're very proud about that. So we're going to keep going. We have no plans on slowing down at all on the podcast. We're going to focus on Nexus, of course, which is our the annual conference that we co-host with the New York area skeptics, and that we have big hopes on that. We're hoping it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, especially now since it looks like TAM is folded. We're hoping that maybe we could maybe do even bigger numbers every year. So that's going to be a lot of focus. We do a lot of video productions. We've got a kind of a little studio in Steve's house, so we're going to be doing a lot of video. We did a review of Star Wars that's going to come out one of these days. So we're going to do a lot of videos. And I mean, the only thing that I could see impacting any of that would be if we got a TV show. We almost had a TV show a few years ago with National Geographic. We were going to do a conspiracy show. Excuse me. It was incredibly exciting. We filmed the pilot. We were incredibly psyched, but at the last possible minute, it fell through. But if we got a show like that, that's something that would take such a tremendous amount of time that could certainly impact some of our other big projects. But that's the only thing, and that's an incredibly rare thing that I would bet a lot of money it's never going to happen. But it could happen. But it's really the only thing I could envision that would change our direction and our focus. But it's going to be the podcast. It's going to be our conference, videos, things like that. Our online presence, blogging. It's going to all stay for years to come, I hope.
Okay. Hey, James, I heard you. You there?
Yay. Yeah, I'm here.
This is James Garrison of the Oklahoma Skeptics, the
Hi, James.
flyover country skeptics.
How are you?
All right, and you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, it's good not to be a mime again.
Well done, James. Okay.
Thank you.
James, I'll let you say
government programming.
Yeah, it was the Men in Black trying to shut you down, I'm sure.
No, it was actually State Department of Health. She left I didn't pull everything off of something she was doing.
Okay.
I mean,
I like conspiracy better though. Can we have that? Can we go back to?
I'll send you some of the anti-vaxxer stuff that I got sent after I wrote kind of a nasty little blog post.
Oh, yeah, it should be fun. Well, fun.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. James, you have any questions for Bob?
Well, I missed the last few minutes there, but I was going to ask you has anybody brought up the Planet 10, Planet 9, whatever number they're giving it right now?
I haven't. In terms of what you mean, in terms of Nibiru, that angle, you mean?
Yeah.
Or just, I haven't. Go ahead.
I was going to say I didn't know if anybody on the panel had mentioned it, but I was wondering if you'd been hearing about any like the Zachariah Hitchens or Sitchin folks saying that proves that he was right.
Yeah. The ancient astronaut writer. Now I haven't seen too much about it, although the people that do believe in that, they're kind of saying that yes, that we finally have official recognition that there is something big out there. But my take on the scenario was that Nancy Leiter, my take was that she was the one that was really taking this Planet Nibiru idea from Zachariah, who really I don't think he ever said that this is going to hit the Earth. She's the one that kind of ran with that idea. And, but she also says she receives messages from extraterrestrials in her mind. She's contacted them, and she's got an implant in her brain. So I haven't seen anything from her. I'm sure she's excited. But it's just so silly to think that what they think they have discovered in the Kuiper Belt, it could actually come close to the Earth. I mean, this thing is many, many times farther away than Neptune. This thing is never. It's not coming in here, and based on their evidence, it's way out there, and that's why the orbits of those other Kuiper Belt objects are where they are, because that thing is out there so far away. It's just kind of silly, but I'm sure they were very excited about it. I haven't seen too much about it though, which is fine with me.
Okay.
Give them time.
Oh, they don't need much time, do they, Mike?
Yeah.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Bob, if since we're talking about something that I didn't expect on tonight's podcast, given that you are obviously showing the difference between the nonsense and the actual science, and I'm ashamed to say that I actually haven't seen some of your podcasts, and I'd like to later on maybe tell me where I can find some of the catch-ups. Is there on your podcasts and your episodes? Do you have a sort of formula to try to separate the nonsense from the actual science, and to try to tell these people that, oh yes, we've possibly discovered a 10th planet, but it has nothing to do with this nonsense about Nibiru? Do you have a way of separating that sort of thing?
Yeah, we talk quite often about the idea of critical thinking and what scientific skepticism is. The important, if I had to encapsulate it into just a few bullet points, it would be things like learning how to evaluate evidence and what evidence is strong, what evidence is not strong. Just because somebody told you about something, that's quite low grade evidence. Anecdotal evidence is really worthless. Also, a key thing to learn that is very important is for people to understand how fallible human perception is in terms of memory and vision. I mean, the reality in our head is not the reality that's out there. It's a constructed reality. And so it's very fallible. People can make mistakes in memory and judgment and vision. And once you appreciate the fallibility of our perceptions, and I think it's much easier to think, oh wow, I was totally wrong about that, or this guy was totally wrong about that. So we try to get those ideas across on the podcast, and I think if people internalize some of those big ideas, I think they would go a long way into being better critical thinkers.
Yeah, it's not just perception; it's also memory that is.
Oh my God, absolutely. It's
challenging.
It really is. I've got a funny story about memory. Years ago, the last time I was asked to be on jury duty, the lawyers bring you into the room and they voir dire you. They're basically asking you questions to see if you would be good for the jury. And they said, "So Bob, so what do you do in your spare time?" And I said, "Well, I'm a member, a co-founder of of a skeptic society, and I was actually writing at that time an article entitled "The Fallibility of Human Memory." And as soon as I told that to the lawyers, I was literally in my car and going home 5 minutes later. They didn't want to have anything to do with me at all. So that's a key point. Memory is horrible. It's completely horrible, and people think they've got video recorders in their head, and they say, I remember it, just like it was yesterday. But they don't realize that memories, as you recall them and think about them and talk about them, you're subtly changing those memories, sometimes to a dramatic degree, to fit your narrative of how the high points of your narrative in your mind. People don't appreciate that, and that's one thing that good skeptics really need to know.
Yeah, I never could explain that to my first wife.
More generally, it's a problem of cognitive bias, of which memory biases are one class.
Well, memories can just be wrong. They can be false. They can be not just biased. They can be completely.
Sure.
Well, memories tend to be constructed on the basis of various cognitive biases. Most famously, confirmation bias.
That's huge. Confirmation bias is absolutely immense. And yeah, I totally agree. And one of the key things that people need to do is try to figure out what their own biases are. And because that's what's going to direct, how you perceive things. And if you know what your biases are, then that's a big step. That's a very important step to take. That's difficult for everybody, even good skeptics.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, not you, Bob, but a lot of skeptics, people who call themselves skeptics, are under the delusion that they don't have biases because they're such good rational skeptics, and of course.
Yeah. No, there's no perfect skeptic except maybe Steve, but everybody else.
Oh well, Steve, yeah, but other than him. No, I'm sure he'd be the first one to tell you that he also shares human foibles.
Sure.
Anybody else? Well, let's keep this rolling.
You said.
James. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say real quick. What are your views on the? There's something Paul said made me think of this one. But okay, I live in Oklahoma, home of James Inhofe and Sally Kern and other people who call themselves skeptics on a variety of things, but they're just deniers. And unfortunately, in the media, that tends to give people who are really skeptical a bad name. And like when I started working with Oklahoma skeptics, we had a lot of vaccine deniers, climate change deniers, people like that coming into the group and getting upset when they found out that, we weren't cynical about it, we weren't deniers. How do you propose going about dealing with the media in terms of using the word skeptic? Like when the media calls you a skeptic, they think that you're just a denier of something, at least here in Oklahoma.
It's tricky. The word skeptic has a lot of baggage that people think you're cynical. They equate skepticism with cynicism, and that's unfortunate. I think, though, that in the past 10 or 15 years, skepticism has kind of improved its brand a bit, has lost some of that baggage, so that's good. But the whole concept of deniers is it's a spectrum. It's if you have a healthy skepticism, if there is a genuine scientific controversy, then you could say that you could call yourself a skeptic of sorts. But when you have evidence that is so solid, and you like, say, for global warming, or that man has landed on the moon, if you are skeptical of things that are clearly pretty damn solid, then you slip into the realm of the denier, and you should be called a denier. You are not a skeptic. And there are some media outlets that are actually starting to realize this, but it really does taint the whole idea of skepticism when deniers are saying that they're skeptics, and in many cases they're not skeptics, they are deniers, and we need to keep pushing that distinction as often as we can, because it hurts the brand for sure.
So you're basically saying try and retake the term. Make sure that if they're a denier, that you call it, that you explain why they're a denier, and if you're a real skeptic, then you're a real skeptic. It's tough. It's tough, and it's something that we've encountered many times over the years, and it's very frustrating to see people saying, "Well, I'm skeptical about that." It's like, no, you're not a skeptic. You're just you're a denier, and the techniques and the tactics that they use are all very similar. But it's a critical distinction. Okay.
Well, that's the problem I have with labels, and it's these days of labels, and it's probably what caused me to ask you that original question. In other words, there is a difference between sheer and I'm going to be blunt about this. There's a difference between sheer stupidity and actual, skepticism and denying. And I hate to even use these words anymore because of the recent labeling of these words and reuse of these words and making them mean what they want to mean. In other words, there is a difference between, to give the example that we were talking about before, was Nibiru and this Planet 10. They really, literally have nothing to do with each other. But the denier or the conspiracy theorist of the Nibiru people will automatically grab onto this. Oh wow, we have a new planet. See, there it is. There's Nibiru. No,
right.
No. You're totally missing the point. You're totally missing the fact that this is something new. That sort of thing.
Maybe I'm too cynical, but I don't think they're missing the point. I think it's just clickbait. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. That actually makes me even more angry. Because
they want to sell books. They want to sell TV shows. They want people to click on their links.
You have to make a distinction between true believers and the people who are cynically trying to sell books and T-shirts and the like.
Absolutely, and that's often very difficult to do. Sometimes you would actually, you can't get in anybody's mind, and sometimes somebody that acts like a true believer really is kind of behind the scenes twirling their mustache, and you really can't tell sometimes. So in our case, what we do is that unless there's an overt kind of demonstration of somebody who doesn't believe what they're peddling, we just assume that they're not necessarily, they're not ignorant or stupid. They're just misinformed. They've kind of been swayed by the tons of misinformation and propaganda that's out there, and that in many cases, if they really started just reading the right websites or listening to our podcast, they could actually kind of get a better handle on some of these topics that are vying for their attention.
Well, I think most people are skeptical about most things. There's just certain things that they're biased towards not being skeptical about. People can be
sacred cows for sure. They are pernicious. They're things that you could be a great skeptic in many ways, but this one thing that your skeptical blinders are off. People are very good at compartmentalizing. They could have contrary beliefs in one brain. It's like, how could you believe this and this? And that's kind of what people do. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
something you gotta fight against.
we all have blind spots. I mean,
Sure.
and I'm not sure. I could not swear to you that if I knew what my blind spots were, that I would want to be rid of them. I hope.
Yeah.
I like to think I would, but maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would want to keep them around for a while because they're comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Identifying them is the half the battle. For me, one of my blind spots, perhaps, I think I'm a little bit too optimistic about the future of technology and science. I tend to think that lots of amazing things are going to happen, and maybe sooner than they really will have. I try to
What are you talking about? Nanotechnology.
And nanotechnology, I'm convinced it's gonna be a new industrial revolution that's going to change the world. But the big question is when. There's lots of variables affecting that. But I try not to get too excited about it because it's gonna do amazing things. But I don't know when, but I try not to get too.
Well, I think a lot of that is
overly optimistic.
Yeah, a lot of that is knowing how to read university press releases. Right? They tend to some scientist makes a very cautious, very small advance, and then their PR office will write it up as the next big revolution.
It's so frustrating. You got to really read between the lines. You got to look at the original papers. We've all encountered it. It's so frustrating when you read these titles or these science news items that bear very little resemblance. They're trying to get people to read it. They're trying to get people to click in, and it's so frustrating when they get it, and it often happens so very wrong. That's why for my blogs, my science blogs, I often try to read the original work because the news items can be way off base.
Oh,
crazy.
Yeah. Well, read the scientists. The scientists are often very cautious about what they claim to be the truth. They say, well, given this, and this, maybe, and then the person writing the press release who's not a scientist will say, our scientists have discovered the cure for cancer, right?
Right. That's the best one. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to cure the common cold based on this little study that has really next to nothing to do with any of that. So yeah, you just got to learn how to read it.
Well, and then the press release is taken up by hundreds of various news organizations that assign somebody to write a story, and they never go to the original paper. They just read the press release and then they embroider further on that.
Absolutely. And often they're not even science writers anymore. They got rid of so many of them. Sometimes it's the person that does, the house and garden section of the newspaper writing the science stories, and they're not real science journalists, and they're a much rarer breed these days than they used to be.
Yeah. I've been involved in some popular space and science stories, and I've seen the press come in, and we've told them, we've tried to brief the reporter on the details of what's going on, and then he or she goes off and writes a story. And it's not that they didn't listen to us, it's that it is so oversimplified that it's wrong.
Yeah. Right. And often before they even see you, they have their story in their head, and they're just looking for you to maybe a couple quotes here and there to support the decisions they've already made. The decisions have been made by the time they even get to you. So it's almost, there's almost nothing you could do in a lot of cases. It's very disheartening.
Well, sometimes you see the reporter nodding their head like, oh yeah, I get it. And it's really just not like an automatic motor response.
Yeah.
They don't really get it. Thank you for confusing me further. And then, so yeah, I've got to the point where if I see a site that is just parroting press releases, I will not return to that site.
Yeah.
I like things more like nature.com where they actually dig in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's step outside the comfort zone a little bit here, Bob.
I have to?
Yeah, just a little bit. I have actually, well, first of all, before I get Anybody else have something they want to talk to Bob about? Okay.
I have a question.
Okay, Nick.
You mentioned earlier in the show here that once your podcast became popular, it, quote, opened the world of skepticism to you, and I'd be kind of curious what that world includes or what it consists of.
Well, before the podcast, we were very local. We had members that were within an hour, 2 hours of us, and so we're basically the New England area. And then we do the podcast, and we get emails from people on every continent on the planet. We get emails from a guy in a military sub. We get another email from somebody who's currently refueling a plane in the sky while he's listening to the show. People everywhere. We go to conferences in Vegas, Australia. Steve has gone to the UK, New Zealand. We've been to lots of different states and countries. We met thousands of people. So it just opened it in that way, just in terms of where we go and who we see.
Do you have listeners from International Space Station?
Oh, wow.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
That would be awesome. That I got to push for that now, because that would be a nice feather in our cap. But I don't think so. I haven't come across anybody on the space station. That would be sweet. All right, I got a goal now.
Speaking of that, where can I, for people like me, who loves this sort of thing, and yet for some stupid reason I don't understand why I haven't seen your podcast. Where
We'll have a link in the show notes, Patrick. Unseenpodcast.com.
Okay. All right. I was trying to push for more than that, but okay.
Yeah, you'll get the whole thing. Don't worry about it.
It's just the skepticsguide.org. If you go there, it's all there. Everything you need.
Thank you.
And iTunes, of course.
Yeah, and you guys have over 500 episodes now, right?
Yeah, 530, 540 around there.
Yeah, so you got a lot of catching up to do, Patrick. It could take a while.
We have people that have said, "Hey, I just went through all of your podcasts for the 300 or 400 podcasts in 6 months or 3 months, and it just blows you away." But of course, they've got a job where they could actually listen to 8 podcasts in one day, just based on the nature of their job. So some people just fly through it. I don't know how they could possibly do that, but they're out there.
Bob, I wanted to ask you about, there's been a lot of turmoil in this movement, which is not just a skeptics movement. It's also like a skeptic free thought / atheist /
right.
Lots of other things trying to glom into that. There's been a lot of turmoil, a lot of controversy. And you guys have been sort of the calm center of that to some extent. But I mean, we've had, I won't mention any names, but there have been people who've been very angry at each other, and some extremely prominent people who have been probably a little bit too, probably done drunk tweeting or something, but it shouldn't have been. Where does how do you see that? Is the skeptics / whatever movement falling apart, or is it just healthy controversy?
Well, geez, I think it's a combination of those things. I think whenever you get over the honeymoon period, like, wow, we're all in the skeptics movement, everybody loves everybody, and then it often happens with groups like that where they splinter into their various subgroups of people that want to focus on different things. And that extra focus, like I said earlier, I think that's fantastic. I think one big mistake is to think that a skeptic needs to be this kind of person and focus on religion or any of the other myriad of topics that are subsumed by that. And I think that's a mistake. I think you find what you love. And for us, it's scientific skepticism. We don't necessarily talk about religion at all. I mean, we're all atheists, and we're willing to talk about it, but just not on the show. That's not what we want to focus on. So that, I think that's part of the problem is, people thinking that, what skeptics should do. and I think they should focus on the areas they want to focus on. So yeah, it's in a lot of ways it does seem to be going through very intense growing pains, and that's very unfortunate. And we do try to not engage in a lot of the stuff that's going on. We just want to promote science and talk about science and skepticism. And there's plenty of other places on the internet that you can go to try to learn and read about a lot of these things that are going on that are in many ways hurting the community. And but you could just go to other places and see what's going on. We try not to discuss it too much. We want to just focus on the science outreach, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've kind of stayed away from a lot of the drama. But it's hard to stay 100% away, and of course we get involved here and there, and it's very difficult to navigate. But I think Steve is kind of the voice of the SGU when it comes to that stuff, and I think he does a really good job.
Yeah, he's kind of the honest broker for any of these controversies. People trust him.
Yeah, he's very good at that. He's had to do it a bunch of times over the course of the years, and I think he's written blog posts about these latest controversies, and I think they're very well reasoned, and this latest controversy was is very frustrating, and I'm not going to comment too much about it, but it's very frustrating, and it's as it always is, when you've got a committee like Nexus trying to navigate through this, and committees are committees. Some people agree, some disagree, but you try to get a consensus and stick to your decisions. But it's unfortunate. I try to stay away from all that crap. I just want to talk about physics and astronomy, and I want to do my science outreach, and I just don't want to try to get obsessed with all this stuff. It's
right.
Just so frustrating.
I'll have some links in the show notes to what Bob's referring to, and Julia Golliff's podcast recently had a very good discussion about that whole controversy.
Yeah, I read her take on it on Facebook. She had a lot of valid things to say. It was an interesting read, and I agreed with a lot of it. Sure, mistakes have been made on all sides. Yeah.
Okay. Mike, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, kind of along the same lines of controversy and science outreach, because one of the interesting chapters in the SGU saga was the run-in with Alex Tsakiris and the Skeptical, that thing. So for the audience, if you want to explain what actually happened there, and then I'm also interested in how will be a good. I'd like to know with all that, when that was over, or I don't know if it's still over or you're still trying to, but it's because I just recently read Tsakiris just came out with a book, and I recommend no one read it, because it's one, you can probably get it for free off his it's just his podcasts transcripts with some notes like scribbled in between.
That's the book?
That's the book.
Okay.
That's basically the book in a nutshell. And but he has that he sounds like a skeptic, but he's like, he promotes a lot of the pseudos, of course, I think you were, SGU was dealing with a near-death experience, and then there was the challenge with the experiment, if you could elaborate on that, or that whole chapter. And then was it just, what happened in any aftermath after that?
Well, I'll tell you everything I remember. It's not going to take long. he had a show, he had a podcast. And you were right, he does kind of come across superficially like a skeptic, but really isn't. I remember he was very compelled by very low grade evidence, which is common for true believers like that. So Steve went on his show, and I think he came on the show, and then I remember it was kind of very frustrating. And I remember Steve, even he couldn't, of course, they couldn't convince each other of the other side. They said that maybe they would run an experiment together, and of course Steve would make sure that the experimental setup was solid to prevent any possibility of any shenanigans going on, or even just honest mistakes. And so we decided we would try to do this with him, and then it just never happened. It was kind of very frustrating situation, kind of dealing with him, and it just never happened. And it's going back how long ago we talked? Is this like 7-8 years? So I don't remember much more than what I just said. I just wasn't too interested in that whole saga. And Steve kind of handled most of it in terms of interfacing with him on the show, and then through emails. When Steve went on his show, so Steve could give you a much fuller account than I just did, because he kind of lived it much more than I did. But so I can't really say too much more than that, because I just really don't remember about it. It's been quite a while.
Okay.
What do you think it is that motivates charlatans? Internet hoax?
Well, it depends. It depends what kind of charlatan they are. Like we said earlier, if you're a true believer, then these people, they're not technically a charlatan. They really believe something.
Someone like Richard Hoagland. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
That's Hoagland. Yeah, he's somebody. I haven't really looked into him in quite some time, but he strikes me as somebody that's not necessarily a charlatan, but just somebody whose pattern recognition is pathological. This is somebody that so wants to see these conspiracies and see these artifacts from alien civilizations. He wants it so bad that any critical thinking he might have ever had, it was just completely out the window. And how pattern recognition works for humans. He sees these patterns that clearly aren't constructs. They're clearly, he doesn't want to think that they're natural. So I think he really believes a lot of this stuff, and it just goes to show you how easy it is for people to fool themselves especially when they're so super motivated to believe something specific.
Like, oh look, it's a triangle.
Yeah, I was so happy when the face on Mars, when they finally got high resolution images of that. Because it was fantastic, because it was clearly a butte on Mars, a natural formation, but you could kind of see how there could be kind of how you could see it as a face from a certain angle, and of course the sunlight was perfect on that first low resolution image. The nostril, one of the nostrils was like just a data loss area. There was no data there, so it was colored black, and that just happened to be the perfect placement for a nostril, which really helped give you the impression of a face. And it's just amazing. Pattern recognition is huge in skepticism and critical thinking, because we are pattern recognition animals. We are fantastic at pattern recognition, but sometimes it goes awry, and you see a pattern that you ascribe meaning to, and there's no meaning to it. It's just a face in the cloud. It's not a real face or anything else in people. Or seeing the face of Christ in a taco. It's like, no, it's just a face, and you're making it into a face. It's just a random whatever, and it's powerful. It's so powerful. People have done amazing things because of pareidolia, as it's called.
Yeah, once you see that face, you can't unsee it, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it makes sense. Sometimes people will say, "Well, how come I always see faces?" the answer we are to see a face. I remember reading about experiments they did on infants, and they somehow determined that an infant will focus on a human face, like the arrangement of two eyes, a nose, and a mouth, longer than the baby would focus on, two eyes, a nose, and a mouth that are randomly oriented. I mean, this is a hard wiring. So of course, we're primed to see faces because we're so good. We are social creatures. So a face to us is everything. I mean, that we are so attuned to faces, and that's why, say for example, when Jurassic Park came out, those dinosaurs were computer generated. Now that was old computer generated technology. I mean, but they looked great. They looked fantastic. Even today, if you saw them today, they look fantastic. That's because we've never seen dinosaurs. We're not intimately aware of how they move and react. Whereas a human face, to this day, we still cannot create an up-close computer-generated face that's talking and moving and expressing. There's something about it that just doesn't look right because we are attuned to the tiniest subtleties about the human face. And if something is wrong, even if it's something so small that we're not quite sure what it is, we'll say, that just doesn't look right. And of course, that leads to the whole idea of the uncanny valley. And these animated faces look like kind of animated corpses. They look just really creepy. And but that just goes to show that faces are just so critical. It was so critical in our evolution because you had to know who was your friend and who was your enemy, and the face was one of the best ways to determine to read that body language was just so critical.
Yeah, I think social interaction were key to our evolution. We're still kind of catching up to that.
Yeah.
Finally, Bob, let's talk. I know we have an international panel here, but let's kind of focus on the U.S. a little bit, maybe understand that better. We seem to have a real problem with science education, science understanding in the U.S. What would President Bob do about that?
What I would do is I would revamp our core curriculum. I would critical thinking would be taught throughout school. That to me, that would be key because often, and you hear this a lot, that science education is a lot of rote memorization, and it's not trying to employ critical thinking skills. Evaluating evidence, everyday evidence that people or claims that people may say. I mean, I think critical thinking is just so critical. It's just so important, and people that have had classes sometimes. A professor will actually have a critical thinking class, and they always sell out. People just eat this stuff up. But we need to have things like that in the very lower grades, and we've got to foster. I think we've got to foster an interest somehow in science. I mean, I don't know if it was Carl Sagan or Bill Nye or somebody said that every child is a scientist, and then we kind of like just beat it out of them, and they just kind of lose interest. And if we could kind of maintain that fascination with the world and nature. I think it would help us tremendously. We've done, how many studies have we read where people they don't even know that the Earth revolves around the sun, or that the moon it's a moon and it's not a planet, or that say an atom is smaller than a molecule. It's mind-boggling. How could you not know these things? How could that not stick in their education? And what really gets me, and this is something that might be a little more difficult, is how could you not have interest? How could you not want to know that, say, the Earth is revolving around the sun? How could you not be curious enough to make sure you kind of know that thing? How could you not pick it up in modern culture with all the movies and TVs? It's tough. It's really tough. But I think I would create a virtual curriculum, all online. All kind of living documents created by the best people that could create these, so that we wouldn't be beholden to, say, like Texas, the Texas textbooks that have evolution disclaimers. And this is something that would be completely online, completely free for any school that wants them. We would develop an entire curriculum, and sure, that would take it would take time and money and people. But if I was in the position of power to do that, I would make sure that was done. And I think some of those things, I think that would go a long way to helping with the scientific literacy for the United States.
Okay, well, thanks, Bob. What we're going to do now is go around the table. Bob will be last, and we will give our final thoughts, and you get to get one recommendation, which you haven't given before. It can be anything. It can be a website, a book, a movie, a podcast, a CD. I don't know. Your ex-girlfriend's phone number. No, don't do that. So, Patrick, don't do that. So we'll start with Mateusz, who has to leave soon. So Mateusz.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm going to break the rules about one recommendation, but you just stopped my plans. Well, I'm going to recommend the last topic that Bob talked about. Basically, some people still believe in flat Earth. And I recommend you guys go on YouTube and just see the response of Neil deGrasse Tyson to the BOB claims of the Earth is flat. The video is just hilarious.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Okay. Anything else, Mateusz?
Yeah, and I just want to say there's this really funny. I found really funny petition on the internet. Remove Bob Novella from the show, and 3 years running, 3 years running, 8 supporters.
8. We're up.
Yeah, that just shows how Bob is just popular and really like. People really like Bob.
We're
8
up to
supporters.
8.
Yeah,
Well,
8 people want to remove him from the show.
Or it could be that maybe that webpage just hasn't been promoted well enough for people to learn about it. So let's keep it a secret.
Oh, not anymore. It's out there now. Okay.
Damn.
We have it in the podcast notes.
Oh, yeah. Adam Smith.
I'd like to thank Bob for his time. It's been very interesting listening to him, hearing some of his thoughts, and I wish him well with the next 10 years of your podcast.
Thank you very much.
I would like to recommend something that I have recommended before, but the citizen science project, Snapshot Serengeti, has just started its new 9th season. So I'd like to recommend people go there and have some fun looking at all the animals in the Serengeti and helping science along as well.
Great. Patrick Festa.
Oh, I don't have any lined up recommendations this time, but I'm going to recommend Bob. I'm going to recommend the Skeptics Guide.org because he's a man after my own heart. It's what I've been trying to do. Everything he said about the lack of science literacy and everything Neil deGrasse Tyson has echoed with that voice has been, I love this guy. I'm gonna actually have the page up on another tab, and I'm gonna look into it immediately after this show is over, and I'm going to plaster it all over my Google and my Facebook and my Facebook group and everything. I'm also gonna look for. I see that you're on Facebook, so I'm gonna look for that too, and I'm going to do my best to plaster you all over the place.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words.
Nick Nielsen.
I would like to say Happy Darwin Day for starters. This is the 206th anniversary of Darwin's birthday.
Oh wow, fantastic!
Oh, I'm sorry I missed that. Okay, go ahead.
It's just damn gravitational waves swamping the news cycle.
It's all over the place.
A busy week for science. For my recommendation, I would like to mention I recently learned about an institution called the Copernicus Center for Interdisciplinary Studies, which is based at the Jagiellonian University at Krakow, and Mateusz can tell me if I mispronounce that or not. And they have a YouTube page where they have a large number of lectures. A lot of them are in Polish, some of them are in English, and they have a really compelling approach. And I'd like to mention one lecture in particular, which is George F.R. Ellis, who was a collaborator with Stephen Hawking on the large-scale structure of space-time, has a 2012 Copernicus Center lecture on the nature of cosmology today.
Okay, good. Sounds good. And let's see, Mike Bowler.
Well, I already gave you my don't do, so I think I'm good. I'm good on recommendations.
James, okay, Mike, I'm cutting your salary by 10%.
Cool.
How do you divide by?
Oh, crap.
I think so. All I see is his.
Okay,
smiling
I'm
face
back.
there.
I'm back. Sorry.
I thought it was James's turn.
For some reason, my Hangout.
Oh, I'm just going to go ahead and. Wow, he's muted.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? James is. Yeah, go ahead,
I
James.
see two Pauls here.
Yeah, I see two of them.
I was
well,
seeing three
It's
for
a
a second.
ghost. It's a ghost.
And they're
no,
not in sync.
there
It's
are
hilarious.
two of us. How else?
Hey, Bob, there's your evidence for parallel dimensions.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in with my recommendation and everything. But first, Bob, I've got to say I've been a fan of yours for years. It's really good to finally get to be able to speak to you and talk to you a bit. So,
Thank
and
you,
don't mind
James.
the accent; it just kind of comes out.
Thank you, James.
But my recommendation is going to be this little web series I found a while back. It's pretty funny, especially if you like kind of a revisionist type history thing. It's called Ock the Skeptical Caveman. And I'll send Paul the links for it, but it's on YouTube and it is pretty good.
It's funny. A lot of work. But it's funny.
Okay.
Yeah, but it looks like it was well worth it, and it's entertaining.
Sure is.
Now, my own recommendation is.
Hey, he's back.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. My own recommendation. I actually had a bunch of them this week, and I couldn't decide between them. But my own recommendation is Julia Gallus' podcast. Rationally Speaking, since we're on a skeptical theme tonight.
And again,
We have lost Paul again, indeed.
I'm still here. Okay, well,
I think he took that suggestion, take up mind school, a little too seriously.
okay, look, guys, I'll you can't hear me, but
Now we can.
okay,
We can now.
Okay, obviously there's some issues here. I was going to recommend Julia Gallus' podcast, Rationally Speaking. She used to do it with Massimo Paolucci, who's since left the podcast about a year ago, but Julia has carried on very well. She always has interesting guests, and she's a very well read, thoughtful person, and I think you'll enjoy it. You won't agree with everything, but that's not the point, right? The point is to get your own thinking stimulated, and maybe we all need a kick in the butt once in a while. So, in fact, a once a week kick in the butt is probably exactly what I need. Okay. So, Bob, you're the last one to go. Final thoughts.
I just wanted to thank all you guys for having me on. I had a great time. You were very kind. I really enjoyed myself. Also, I just want to throw out, Steve will kill me if I don't mention the podcast at least twice on the show, the Skeptics, theskepticsguide.org. Check it out. And I also wanted to congratulate all of the scientists, researchers, astronomers, engineers, everybody involved in the discovery of gravitational waves. It's an amazing discovery. We're witnessing the birth of a new branch of astronomy, gravitational wave astronomy. I think it has so much promise. I just can't wait to see what it does. So I want to thank all the hard work, the amazingly hard work that went into that discovery. And way to go, guys. Fantastic.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you, Bob, the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. We'll have links in the show notes where you can find the several hundred episodes that they have done. every week. I don't. You guys have never missed a week.
Not in 10 years.
That's just sick.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, take a
I
break.
can't get my first one up.
This podcast hasn't even been going a year. We've already missed 3 weeks. So on purpose, completely intentional. So anyway, thanks everybody. This is, by the way, you can go to unseenpodcast.com, get the show notes. This is episode 43. There will be links to all the episodes. Thanks to Mateusz, who put the page together initially. And you can go to episode 43 and you can either download the audio directly or just go to the show notes. We'll have links to everything. Panelists, please do send me links to everything you recommended or talked about tonight, and I will put those in the show notes. Now, a couple of notes. See, next week will be a panel discussion only. We don't really have a topic settled on. If you're in the community, if you're in the panel pool, please get on the topics thread and start hashing that out. Episode 44 and 5. The invitations for episode 46 will go out tomorrow, which will be Saturday, the 13th of February. If you want to support this podcast, the best thing you can do is either go on iTunes and give us a review or share the episodes you like with your friends and followers. The next best thing you can do is go to patreon.com/unseenpodcast and drop a little coin on us. We don't ask for much. If everybody who listens gives us a $1 a month, we will have all our costs covered easily, and then actually beyond that. So, and I promise you, any money beyond what covers our cost will be spent to support the podcast and make it better. So, and ultimately, things like transcripts would be great, and I'll try to get that. And James will start wearing pants. And maybe get a real microphone or something. So again, unseenpodcast.com. We would love to have your feedback for each episode. There's a blog entry. Comments are open. You can also come to our Google Plus listener community or our Google Plus participants community if you want to participate. This is an open participation podcast. As you can see, anybody can be on the panel. You can also, we also have a subreddit for listeners, which I would like to see a lot more activity in. We will read everything that you put out there, all your posts, and anything other than invitations to come see you naked. We will read it and listen to your comments, suggestions. Who should we have on the show? What topics should we cover? What mistakes did we make? Did we get a fact wrong? Did we miss something? So let us know. Okay. So this has been episode 43. It is the 12th of February, 2012, except for Mateusz and Adam are where it's already the 15th. So thanks guys for staying up so late. Let me thank everybody one more time. Adam.
It's been a pleasure.
James.
It's been fun, Paul.
Mateusz.
Thank you guys, and thank you Bob for joining the podcast, and thank you for answering my question on the blog.
Mike Bowler.
Well, thanks everyone, and thanks Bob for being on the show.
Nick Nielsen.
Thanks to everyone.
Patrick Festa.
Thank you for leaving the key under the mat in the back door.
And our special guest for tonight, Bob Novella of the Skeptics Guide to the Universe.
Thanks for inviting me, guys, and have a great Valentine's Day.
Okay, everybody. See you next week. This is the Unseen Podcast, episode 43, and good night.